Sarvebhyo Namo Namaha. Good morning to all. I welcome you all to this session of Sanatana Dharma course basic level being conducted by Veda Samskruti Samiti in association with the Vishyoga Vidyapeeth. Today we'll be having a guest lecture. I'll introduce later. We'll start the session with Vande Mataram by Sushmita ji.
Vande Mataram, Vande Mataram, Sujalam Sufalam, Malayaj Sheetalam, Sasya Syamalam Mataram, Vande Mataram. Shubhrajyotsna pulakitayaminim pullakusumita drumadala shobhinim suhasinim sumadhura bhashinim sukhadam varadam mataram vande mataram vande mataram.
Vande Mataram. Thank you, Sushmita ji. Now I request Dr. Shamala ji to recite the prayer, please.
We'll have meditation for 1 minute, followed by Omkar. Om Gananam Tva Ganapati-gum Havamahe Kavim Kavinam Upamasravastamam Jeshtarajam Brahmanam Brahmanaspata Anah Shunvannutibhisida Sadanam Om Shri Mahaganadhipataye Namaha. Om Prano Devi Saraswati Vajebhirvajinivati Dhinamavityavatu. Om Shri Mahasaraswatyai Namaha. Gurureva Gati Gurumeva Bhaje Gurunaiva Sahasmi Namo Gurave. Na Guroh Paramam Shishurasmi Guroh Matirasti Gurau Mam Pahi Guroh Jnananandamayam Devam Nirmalaspatikakrutim Adharam Sarva Vidyanam Hayagrivam Upasmahe श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादशङ्करं लोकशङ्करं शङ्करं शङ्कराचार्यं केशवं बादरायणम् सूत्रभाष्यकृतौ वन्दे भगवन्तौ पुनः पुनः ईश्वरो गुरुरात्मेति मूर्तिभेदविभागिने व्योमवद्व्याप्तदेहाय दक्षिणामूर्तये नमः असतो मा सद्गमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्योर्मा अमृतं गमय ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः मातृदेवो भव पितृदेवो भव आचार्यदेवो भव अतिथिदेवो भव ॐ सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः हरिः ॐ श्रीगुरुभ्यो नमः हरिः ॐ
Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Thank you, Dr. Shamlaji. Now, today we'll be having a guest lecture on an altogether different topic, the philosophical significance of the 64 Aksharas we have in Sanskrit. Shri Achyut Purushotham Karveji is here. I welcome him on behalf of all of the participants. I'll give a very brief introduction about Shri Achyut Purushotham ji. He has been studying the tabla of Ahmad Jan Tirakwa for the past 50 years, trying out the reason for the exquisite lingual sounds he could produce on the tabla. He was the first to point out that his technique of playing the tabla was the outcome or reflection of a chaste recitation of the compositions. To reveal the chaste phonation of letters, he took the refuge of the Maheshwar Sutras. In the year 2015, after a study of 10 years on the Maheshwar Sutras, he recorded his findings on the 64 letters of the Sanskrit language and the 18 Ans in his book Revering the Atlantis of Sanskrit Phonology. He has also been working with children, teaching them to read and write the Devanagari script. In this effort, he was guided by Pandit Vasudevacharya Joshi, a Vedic Pandit, and Professor Shivkumar Chaturvedi, a professor of Sanskrit grammar at Bharatiya Sanskrit Samsthan, Lucknow. Today's topic is based on how Akshara and Varna are not only different, but of altogether different categories. So welcome, sir. Please take over the stage. Please unmute, sir.
Can you hear me? Can all of you hear me?
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
1 minute. I'll just share the article. Chrome I entered 1 minute. Chrome window. One second. Can you all see?
Yes, sir. It's appearing.
Oh, where is the... So, So, welcome all of you. And today we are going to see try to understand the philosophy of the 64 Aksharas and why those 64 Aksharas are very important for our tradition, and how they have really structured our whole philosophy. This article, though it has been titled as Philosophy of Aksharas, is really connected to the word chitta. And what is the nature of the chitta through an understanding of Aksharas is the subject matter of this topic. So I will now read. It is in two parts. One is its theoretical part, the second is its practical aspect. So, philosophy of the 64 Aksharas, abstract. The essay proposes a functional reinterpretation of chitta as the distributing, transducing, and homeostatic principle that maintains a stable correspondence between reality and Shabda. Departing from the traditional view of chitta as merely a constituent of the antakarna, it argues that chitta is grounded in two innate and complementary physiological capacities: the five jnanendriyas, through which reality becomes available to perception, and the 64 aksharas, which constitute the unmanifested neuromuscular potential for articulate speech. Through the continuous interaction of these two capacities, chitta transduces sensory experience into meaningful linguistic expression while preserving the stability of their correspondence despite continual changes in both the organism and its environment. Language is therefore understood not as an arbitrary symbolic system, but as a dynamic embodied process of regulated transduction through which reality is progressively organized into Shabda. On this basis, the essay develops a unified account of cognition, grammar, and metaphysics. It interprets the Sanskrit instrumental case, Tritiya Vibhakti, as the grammatical expression of mediation, distinguishes Brahman as the universal mediating principle from Chitta as its individual manifestation, and examines the relationship between language, cognition, and meaning. The discussion culminates in a reinterpretation of yoga, where Nirodha signifies the restoration of Chitta to its original universality through re-establishment of the intrinsic order of the 64 Aksharas. Within this framework, Shiksha, Vyakarana, Vedic recitation, and yoga emerge as complementary disciplines directed towards preserving, understanding, and embodying and restoring the mediating order of language and consciousness. Introduction. The method, the starting point of the investigation. Every system of knowledge begins not from an explanation of creation, but from what is already given. Every Shastra and every science necessarily presupposes certain foundational realities that are not established by the system itself. Otherwise, reason is driven either into an infinite regress or into circularity. Euclidean geometry begins with axioms. The physical sciences begin with observation, and Panini's grammatical system begins with the Maheshwar Sutras as its given foundation. Likewise, this investigation begins with the reality of embodied human existence. The 64 aksharas and 5 jnanendriyas and the chitta are taken as given. The chitta functions as the mediator between the 5 senses and the 64 aksharas. Through the senses, it receives cognition of the world, and through the aksharas, it manifests that cognition as shabda. The present inquiry is therefore not concerned with explaining the creation of reality, but with understanding the mediating principles by which reality, speech, and cognition are continuously manifested in the present. The nature of the chitta. In the traditional commentarial literature, particularly in the yoga and Vedanta traditions, chitta is generally understood as the internal organ, antarkarna, often regarded either as the composite of manas, buddhi, and ahankara, or as the faculty of memory and mental modifications, vrittis. The present investigation adopts a different standpoint. Rather than treating the chitta as a mental substance or a repository of thoughts and memories, it is understood functionally as the universal mediating principle between perception and expression. The five Jnanendriyas receive the world as already given, while the 64 Aksharas constitute the embodied means through which that cognition is expressed as Shabda. The Chitta is the mediating faculty that relates these two domains, transforming sensory perception into cognition and cognition into articulate speech. Its defining characteristic is therefore not the possession of mental contents, but the mediation of embodied cognition. This functional interpretation shifts the emphasis from the ontology of mind to the process through which reality becomes knowable and communicable. From sensory signal to Shabda, the transducing function of Chitta. The function of the Chitta as a mediating transducer presupposes the availability of both an input domain and an output domain. The five Jnanendriyas provide the incoming signals through which an already existing reality is received. The 64 Aksharas provide the structural repertoire through which the resulting cognition can be transformed into Shabda. The Chitta therefore does not create either perception or language. It mediates between two given domains. Without the Aksharas as the functional units of expression, cognition cannot be converted into articulated Shabda. Thus, the 64 Aksharas are not merely symbols of language, but the necessary structures through which the Chitta performs its transducing function. This word transducing is new in this whole essay. Transduction means transformation of one type of signal into another type of signal. For example, you take a solar cell. It's a transducer. It converts light into electricity. So also the function of the Chitta. Contents. I'll not read the contents. They will go one after another. Part 1, the philosophical foundation. The problem of Chitta. From operation to constitution. The Yoga Sutras place Chitta at the very center of philosophical inquiry through the foundational statement, Yogas Chitta Vritti Nirodha. However, while Patanjali extensively analyzes the movements, vrittis of Chitta, their causes, their restraint and their transformation, he does not explicitly define the constitution of Chitta itself. The Yoga Sutras begin with the operational reality of Chitta rather than with an explanation of its origin, nature, or fundamental characteristics. This creates a fundamental philosophical question. What is Chitta prior to its activities? The grammatical tradition also leaves this question unresolved. Panini's Ashtadhyayi provides a remarkably precise system for the generation of linguistic expressions, but it does not investigate the cognitive principle that makes linguistic activity possible. Patanjali's Mahabhashya extends the discussion to questions of speech, meaning, intention, correctness, and usage. But its primary concern remains the functioning of language rather than the constitution of the Chitta. Bhartrihari, through the concept of Shabda Brahma, Pratibha, and the unity of language and reality, develops the relationship between cognition and speech further. Yet even in the Vakyapadiya does not provide a systematic account of Chitta itself. The later yoga commentarial tradition, beginning with Vyasa, generally identifies Chitta with the Antakarna, the internal instrument comprising Manas, Buddhi and Ahankara. Within this interpretation, Manas coordinates sensory experience, Buddhi discriminates and determines, and Ahankara appropriates experience as I and mine. While this interpretation has become influential, the Yoga Sutras themselves do not explicitly define Chitta in this manner. The present study therefore begins from the unresolved question and proposes that Chitta should not be identified with Manas, Buddhi or Ahankara, memory or the Vrittis, These are subsequent manifestations or differentiations of a more fundamental principle. The hypothesis advanced here is that Chitta is the innate physiological and cognitive potential through which perception, language, cognition, and action become possible. Chitta is the foundation of the 64 Aksharas and 5 Jnanendriyas. The central proposition of this study is that Chitta is not a repository of mental contents, but the functional locus of mediation between the 5 Jnanendriyas and the 64 Aksharas, through which reality is transformed into cognition and cognition into Shabda. The Aksharas are not understood merely as phonetic units or written symbols. They represent universal articulatory cognitive potentialities inherent in the human organism. They are the fundamental principles through which sensory experience becomes capable of being organized into language. The 5 Jnanendriyas, hearing, touch, sight, taste, and smell, provide the channels through which manifest reality is encountered. The 64 Aksharas provide the intrinsic articulatory structure through which these experiences can be differentiated, organized, and expressed. Thus, Chitta consists of two complementary potentialities: the 5 senses through which reality enters the individual, the 64 Aksharas through which reality becomes available as Shabda. At birth, these capacities exist in an unmanifest state. The child is not born with a particular language, but with the universal physiological potential for language. Through interaction with the environment, these latent capacities become progressively activated. Therefore, language is not imposed upon the individual from outside. The capacity for language exists within the very constitution of the Chitta. Chitta is thus not a passive storehouse of expression. It is the living field in which perception and articulation are united. Alternately, it can be understood as the functional locus of or Shakti of Shakti. Shakti is the capacity for manifestation, while the Chitta is the mediating locus in which this capacity operates through the coordination of perception and expression. The 64 Aksharas represent the structured potential of Vak, through which this Shakti is transformed into Shabda. This word Shakti I have taken from Bhartrharya. Chitta is the functional locus of transduction between reality and Shabda. The essential function of Chitta is transduction. Reality and language are not two independent domains that are later connected. Their relationship is established through the mediating activity of Chitta. The process operates in two complementary directions: reality, Chitta, Shabda, cognition. Reality is first encountered through the 5 senses. These sensory experiences enter Chitta, where the 64 Aksharas provide the structure through which they are organized into meaningful linguistic expression. Thus, reality, Chitta, Shabda, cognition. Cognition is therefore not a passive reflection of the external world. It is an active transformation of experience into a form that can be understood, remembered, communicated, and acted upon. The world becomes cognizable because Chitta mediates between sensory experience and language. The second direction, Shabda, Chitta, reality, and Artha. The reverse movement occurs when language directs cognition towards reality. A word is not merely a label attached to an already existing object. Through the activity of the Chitta, Shabda activates the structures through which reality is recognized, recalled, interpreted, and acted upon. Thus, Shabda, Chitta, reality, and then Artha. Artha is therefore not simply meaning, existing independently from language. It is reality as disclosed through the mediating operation of Chitta. Cognition and Artha are consequently not separate entities. They are two directions of the same mediating process. Reinterpreting Bhartrhari, Prakriya as the dynamic activity of the Aksharas. The opening Karika of the Vakpadiya states, Vivartatertha bhavena prakriya jagato yata. Traditionally, this is interpreted as describing the manifestation of the world through the emergence of meaning. The present study proposes that Prakriya may also be understood as the dynamic interaction of the 64 Aksharas with the Chitta. The Aksharas do not function as isolated sounds. They operate as interconnected physiological events. Through their interaction, sensory experience becomes meaningful cognition and simultaneously becomes available as language. Reality does not first exist as a completely independent object and then receive a linguistic name. Rather, reality becomes intelligible through the mediating activity of Chitta. This provides a conceptual bridge between the Yoga Sutras, which investigate Chitta and its vrittis, the Maheshwar Sutras, which reveal the universal structure of articulation, Shiksha, which investigates phonetic realization, and Bhartrhari, who explores the unity of Shabda and Artha. Chitta is potentiality. The preceding analysis leads us to the central definition. Chitta is potentiality. It is not cognition itself, memory itself, sleep itself, or any particular mental state. Rather, it is the underlying capacity or Shakti that makes all these possible. Chitta exists prior to its manifestation. Its actualizations appear as different modes of operation. Cognition is the movement of Chitta from reality towards Shabda. Artha is the movement of Chitta from Shabda towards reality. The vrittis are particular patterns through which this potentiality becomes active. Thus, Chitta is not an activity. It is the potential that makes activity possible. A new interpretation of the five Chitta vrittis. Once Chitta is understood as potentiality and mediation, the five vrittis acquire a different significance. They are not modifications of a passive mental substance. They are different modes through which the mediating potential of Chitta operates. 6.1 Active mediation. Three vrittis represent active engagement. Pramana, Chitta successfully mediates reality into valid cognition. Viparya, the mediating process remains active, but the resulting cognition does not correspond accurately with reality. Vikalpa, Chitta operates through language and conceptual formation, producing possibilities that may not correspond to immediate perception. These three involve active movement between reality and Shabda. Withdrawal or suspension of mediation. The remaining two vrittis belong to a different category. Smriti, memory as the reactivation of established patterns of transduction. Memory is not Chitta itself. Rather, it is the activation of previously established patterns of transduction. What is retained is not an isolated sensory impression or an abstract mental image, but the earlier organization of experience through the Akshara-based structure of Chitta. Every act of perception establishes a coordinated relationship between sensory input, articulatory organization, and meaningful experience. When such an organization is reactivated, the phenomenon is recognized as memory. Because memory consists in the reactivation of an earlier transducing organization, its retrieval ordinarily depends upon an appropriate cue. Such a cue may arise through renewed sensory perception, through an articulatory event, or through internally generated associations that themselves originate from earlier transducing processes. Without a cue corresponding to the original organization of experience, the established pattern remains dormant, although it continues to exist as a potential for reactivation. From this perspective, memory is not a separate faculty, but the renewed activation of previously organized transducing relationships maintained through Chitta. Nidra. Sleep is not the absence of Chitta. It is the suspension of its active mediation while the underlying potential remains intact. Thus, principle and nature, Chitta, innate potentiality. Pramana, correct active mediation. Viparya, distorted active mediation. Vikalpa, conceptual linguistic mediation. Smriti, residual pattern of previous mediation. And Nidra, suspension of active mediation. This distinction is essential for understanding Nirodha. Nirodha cannot mean destruction of Chitta because Chitta is the very principle that makes cognition possible. It can only mean the regulation and reorientation of its movements. From individual Chitta to universal Brahman. 7.1. Brahman as universal potentiality. The interpretation of Chitta as potentiality naturally extends to a corresponding interpretation of Bhartrhari's opening declaration. Anadi Nidhanam Brahma Shabda Tattvam Yadaksharam. Brahma is understood here as the beginningless and endless universal potential underlying language, cognition, and reality. Chitta is not identical with Brahman, but its individual manifestation within embodied existence. If Chitta constitutes the innate physiological and cognitive potential represented by the 64 Aksharas together with the 5 sense organs, then it expresses at the level of the individual uh, the same universal principle that Bhartrhari attributes to Brahman. The relationship may therefore be expressed as Brahman, universal potentiality, Chitta, individual potentiality, 64 Aksharas and 5 sense organs, cognition, Shabda and Artha. The distinction between Brahman and Chitta is thus one of manifestation rather than of essence. Brahman represents universal potentiality. Chitta is its individual realization. Through the coordinated activity of the 64 Aksharas and the 5 sense organs, the universal potential becomes cognition, language, and meaningful engagement with reality. This interpretation does not claim to reproduce Bhartrhari's explicit doctrine, but proposes a philosophical synthesis that brings together the Yoga Sutras, the Maheshwar Sutras, Shiksha, Vyakarana, and Vakyapadiya within a common conceptual framework. 7.2. The Vedas and Shiksha, the highest realization of consciousness. If Chitta is individual manifestation of universal potentiality, then the Vedas represent its highest realization. Their importance lies not merely in scriptural authority or antiquity, but in preserving the most complete realization of consciousness reflecting upon itself through language. Ordinary cognition directs consciousness towards the external world. In the Vedas, this movement becomes reflexive. Consciousness becomes both the knower and the known through the disciplined activity of Shabda. The Vedas therefore embody not only knowledge but also the highest actualization of the universal articulatory principles inherent in Chitta. In this regard, Shiksha investigates not merely correct pronunciation but the living activation of the 64 Aksharas through which the Chitta operates. The Aksharas are not external symbols imposed upon cognition. They are the functional structures of Vak through which the Shiksha transforms cognition into Shabda. The study of Shiksha is thus the study of the embodied process by which these Aksharas are activated and manifested as articulate speech. Within this framework, the Maheshwar Sutras are interpreted as a catalogue of universal articulatory principles rather than merely an arrangement of phonetic sounds. Shiksha preserves these principles in living practice, while Vyakarana analyzes the linguistic structures that arise from them. Grammar is consequently secondary to Shiksha. It describes linguistic forms, whereas Shiksha cultivates the physiological and cognitive process from which those forms originate. In this way, the significance of Vedic recitation also becomes clear. Its purpose is not simply the preservation of sacred text, but the continuous cultivation of the innate articulatory order embodied in the 64 Aksharas. Through disciplined recitation, the latent potential present within Chitta is progressively actualized, allowing consciousness to recognize its own universal foundation. Part 2. The neurophysiological basis of Chitta. transduction, articulation, and the organization of human cognition. Introduction. Chitta is a stable transducing layer. The first part of this study established the philosophical basis of the hypothesis that Chitta functions as the transducing principle between reality and Shabda. The discussion now turns to the manner in which such a transducing function may be understood within the living human body. The present study proposes that Chitta is neither an abstract mental substance nor an isolated anatomical structure. Rather, it is the stable transducing layer through which to which distributed sensory, cognitive, and motor processes are functionally integrated. Its operation depends upon the establishment of a stable correspondence between the 5 Jnanendriyas and 64 Aksharas. The Jnanendriyas continuously provide structured sensory inputs, while the 64 Aksharas constitute the defined neuromuscular potential through which articulated Shabda is realized. The function of Chitta is to maintain the stability of this correspondence by transducing sensory signals into organized patterns of articulatory activity. The investigations presented in this part suggest that this transducing process is implemented through the coordinated networking of distributed neural systems rather than through a single localized center. The anatomical separation of sensory and motor pathways, the organization of the articulatory apparatus, the role of laya in stabilizing neuromuscular coordination, and the sequential transformation of perception into articulate speech together provide the physiological context within which the traditional concept of chitta may be reinterpreted. The discussion that follows, therefore, seeks to establish not merely that transduction occurs, but that the traditional concept of chitta provides a coherent functional principle through which these distributed processes may be understood as a unified whole. The necessity for transduction arises from the anatomical separation of sensory and motor pathways. Sensory signals are conveyed to the brain through specialized afferent pathways, while articulate speech and voluntary movement are executed through distinct efferent motor pathways. Since these pathways are functionally separate at the periphery, a process of transformation and integration is required within the central nervous system to convert sensory information into coordinated motor activity. The present study proposes that this integrative and transducing function corresponds to what the Indian tradition designated as chitta. In this view, chitta is not an independent anatomical organ, but the functional principle through which distributed neural processes are organized into coherent perception, articulate shabda, and voluntary action. The organization of the cranial nerves illustrates the necessity for a transducing process. Sensory information reaches the brain through dedicated afferent pathways, exemplified by the vestibule cochlear nerve CNA for audition, while articulate speech is executed primarily through the motor component of the facial, vagus, and hypoglossal nerves. The trigeminal nerve CN5, although a mixed nerve, further demonstrates the distinction by combining sensory functions with motor control of mastication. Thus, the neural pathways responsible for receiving sensory information are anatomically distinct from those responsible for producing articulate speech. The transformation of sensory signals into coordinated articulatory activity therefore requires an integrative transducing process within the central nervous system. The present study proposes that this functional principle corresponds to the chitta. Transduction, the governing principle linking reality, cognition, and shabda. The central concept developed thus far is that chitta is the transducing principle between manifest reality and shabda. The present study extends this insight further by proposing that whenever mediation through transduction becomes indispensable to the functioning of a system, it ceases to be merely an intermediary and becomes the governing principle of that system. This principle may be illustrated through Marx's analysis of money. Money first appears as a simple medium of exchange between commodities. However, once every process of production, circulation, distribution, and accumulation depends upon it, money no longer functions merely as a mediator. It becomes the governing principle of the entire economic order. The power of money lies not in its material existence, but in its universal mediating function. The same structural principle operates in the philosophical system proposed here. At the individual level, Chitta mediates between manifest reality and Shabda. Through the coordinated activity of the 64 Aksharas and the 5 Jnanendriyas, every act of perception, cognition, linguistic expression, and meaningful action depends upon this mediation. Consequently, Chitta is not simply one faculty among others, but the governing principle of individual cognitive life. This individual process reflects a corresponding universal principle. Brahman is understood here not as a static metaphysical substance, but as the beginningless and endless principle of universal mediation. Just as Chitta mediates between reality and language within the individual, Brahman mediates between Purusha and Prakriti at the cosmic level. The same mediating structure therefore operates at two complementary levels. Purusha, Brahman, Prakriti, in the individual, manifest reality, Chitta and Shabda. Chitta is thus the individual manifestation of the universal mediating principle. The 64 Aksharas, together with the 5 Jnanendriyas, constitute the operative powers through which this universal principle becomes active in embodied existence. The relation between Brahman and Chitta is therefore one of manifestation rather than identity. Brahman represents universal mediation. Chitta represents the same mediating principle functioning within the individual. The present interpretation therefore departs from substance-based metaphysics. Neither Brahman nor Chitta is conceived primarily as an entity. Both are understood through their mediating function. Reality, language, cognition, and meaning exist only through continuous mediation. Mediation is therefore not simply a process occurring within the world. It is the governing principle through which both the universe and individual cognition remain intelligible. 10. The grammatical expression of mediation, transduction. Having established mediation as the governing principle of cognition and reality, the same principle may now be recognized in Sanskrit grammar. The grammatical categories of language do not merely describe relationships between entities. They also distinguish the means through which those relationships become effective. This distinction is most clearly expressed through the contrast between the Shashti, the genitive case, and the Tritiya, the instrumental case. The Shashti Vibhakti expresses an existing relation between two entities. It indicates possession, association, dependence, or belonging, but it does not explain how the relation is brought about. It simply states that the relation exists. The Tritiya Vibhakti, by contrast, identifies the mediating principle through which one entity becomes related to another. It expresses not merely accompaniment or instrumentality, but the effective means by which action, cognition, and transformation become possible. In this sense, the Tritiya is a grammatical expression of mediation. A true mediator does not belong exclusively to either of the two poles it connects. It occupies the intermediate position and derives its significance from enabling that relation. This feature is reflected in Sanskrit grammar itself. The instrumental case stands between the agent and object, not as an independent participant competing with them, but as the indispensable means through which their interaction becomes effective. The same principle operates throughout the philosophical system proposed in this study. At the individual level, Chitta mediates between manifest reality and Shabda. At the universal level, Brahman mediates between Purusha and Prakriti. In both instances, the mediator does not replace either pole, but continuously sustains their relationship. Mediation therefore becomes the operative principle through which cognition, language, and manifestation occur. This grammatical observation also reinforces the distinction between relation and mediation. The genitive merely states the two entities are related. The instrumental reveals the principle that makes the relation operative. Grammar thus preserves the conceptual distinction that parallels the philosophical distinction developed throughout this article. The significance of this observation extends beyond grammar. It suggests that Sanskrit encodes within its grammatical structure an implicit philosophy of mediation. The instrumental case is not simply one among several case endings, but the linguistic expression of a universal principle. Whenever a relation requires an effective means, the Tritiya identifies that mediating agency. Accordingly, the movement developed in this study may be summarized as follows. At the grammatical level, the Tritiya expresses mediation. At the cognitive level, Chitta mediates between reality and Shabda. At the metaphysical level, Brahman mediates between Purusha and Prakriti. The same structural principle therefore governs language, cognition, and cosmology. The grammatical categories of Sanskrit do not merely describe linguistic usage, they reflect a deeper organization of reality in which mediation is the fundamental mode through which relations become effective. Yoga as the restoration of Chitta. The interpretation developed in this study leads to a distinctive understanding of yoga. If Brahman is the universal efficient principle governing the continuous manifestation of the cosmos, the Chitta is its individual manifestation, functioning as the efficient principle through which perception, language, and cognition become possible. The term efficient principle is used here not in the Aristotelian sense of an external efficient cause, but as the mediating principle that continuously sustains and regulates a process. Brahman mediates between Purusha and Prakriti, while Chitta mediates between the 64 Aksharas and the 5 Jnanendriyas. What Brahman accomplishes cosmically, Chitta accomplishes within the individual. Yoga must therefore be understood not as the destruction of this mediating principle, but as its restoration to its proper mode of operation. This understanding provides a fresh interpretation of Patanjali's definition of yoga. Yoga, chitta vritti nirodha. If chitta is the innate mediating potential constituted by the 64 aksharas, nirodha cannot signify the suppression or annihilation of chitta itself. The vrittis are not the essence of chitta, but its particular modes of operation. Pramana, Viparya, and Vikalpa represent its active engagement with reality, while Smriti and Nidra arise when this activity is withdrawn or suspended. Yoga is therefore the disciplined regulation of these modes, enabling Chitta to function in its natural, unobstructed state. When its conditioned patterns cease to dominate, the drashta abides in its own nature. Yoga is thus the conscious governance and purification of individuals' mediating principle rather than the cessation of its existence. The concept of Nirodha acquires a deeper significance when understood through the Upanishadic principle of Neti Neti. Just as the Upanishads refuse to identify Brahman with any particular manifestation, Yoga refuses to identify Chitta with any one of its vrittis. The vrittis are genuine expressions of Chitta, and yet none exhaust its nature. Nirodha is therefore the disciplined process of freeing Chitta from exclusive identification with its transient manifestation. It is not the negation of Chitta, but the negation of conditioned limitation, allowing the mediating principle to become transparent to its universal source. Within this framework, Samadhi is understood as the realization of the universal through the particular. Since Chitta is enabled by the 64 Aksharas, the disciplined study of these Aksharas through Shiksha becomes simultaneously a linguistic, cognitive, and yogic discipline. Each articulated sound is a Vyakti, while the corresponding Akshara represents its Jati. The universal articulatory principle. The journey towards Samadhi is therefore the progressive movement from individual manifestations to the universal principles they embody. The realization of the 64 Aksharas is not merely the acquisition of phonetic knowledge, but the recognition that every act of perception, articulation, and cognition express the same universal mediating principle. The path may therefore be summarized as Shiksha, knowledge of the 64 Aksharas, awareness of Chitta, Nirodha of Vrittis, recognition of the universal Jati through the particular Vyakti, Samadhi. In this interpretation, yoga is fundamentally a process of restoration rather than suppression. Through the disciplined realization of the 64 Aksharas, the individual Chitta progressively regains its original transparency, revealing itself as the particular manifestation of the universal efficient principle called Brahman. Chitta, volition, and the origin of action. Chitta is dynamic potentiality. Patanjali begins the Yoga Sutras not by explaining the origin or constitution of Chitta, but by describing its activity through the aphorism Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Likewise, the drashta is introduced through its state of abiding in its own nature, rather through an analysis of its ontological status. The concern of the Yoga Sutras is therefore primarily practical, focusing on the regulation of Chitta rather than on its philosophical foundation. The present study proposes that Chitta is the innate mediating potential constituted by the 64 Aksharas together with the 5 Jnanendriyas. Such a mediating principle cannot be regarded as passive. If Chitta is to transform manifest reality into Shabda and Shabda into meaningful engagement with reality, it must possess an inherent principle of activity. This principle is volition. Volition is not an accidental attribute added to Chitta, but its intrinsic dynamic capacity. It is through volition that the latent potential of Chitta becomes actualized in cognition, thought, and action. The sequence may therefore be represented as Chitta, potentiality, volition, engagement, vritti. The vrittis are thus not disturbances imposed upon an otherwise passive entity. They are the organized expressions of the volitional activity inherent in Chitta. Pramana, Viparya, and Vikalpa are all directed engagements through which Chitta actively mediates between reality and language. Yoga therefore cannot aim at the destruction of either Chitta or volition. Rather, Nirodha signifies the disciplined regulation of volitional activity so that the mediating power of Chitta is consciously governed rather than habitually directed. The global agitation of Chitta. The activity of Chitta should not be understood as a series of isolated reactions to external events. Since Chitta constitutes an unified mediating field, every encounter with reality or Shabda activates the whole rather than a single localized faculty. For this reason, the present study prefers the expression agitation, not stimulation. Stimulation suggests a localized activation confined to a sensory or cognitive function. Agitation, by contrast, denotes the activation of the entire mediating field. Reality enters Chitta through the 5 Jnanendriyas, while language enters through the 64 Aksharas. Both forms of engagement reorganize the whole field of Chitta. The process may be summarized as environment, agitation of Chitta, volition, vritti, cognition, and action. Chitta therefore functions simultaneously as the receiver of agitation and the organizer of response. External objects, bodily conditions, memories, and linguistic expressions all activate the same mediating field. Yet, agitation alone does not determine action. It awakens the volitional capacity of Chitta, which then organizes multiple possibilities before directing behavior. The familiar example of hunger illustrates this principle. Hunger is initially an internal physiological condition. Yet it immediately organizes perception, attention, memory, language, and reasoning into a coordinated search for nourishment. The response is global rather than local. Reality and Shabda therefore enter Chitta through different routes, but participate in the same unified process of volitional organization. Within this process, Manas coordinates the available possibilities, while Buddhi evaluates and determines the appropriate course of action. Neither faculty initiates the movement. The initiating principle remains the volitional activity of Chitta itself. 12.3 Reverse formatting of Chitta, neurogenesis, synaptogenesis, neuroplasticity, and maturation of Manas, Buddhi, and Samskara. Chitta begins life as an unmanifest potentiality. The 64 Aksharas and the 5 Jnanendriyas are present from birth as innate capacities rather than acquired abilities. Together, they constitute the physiological and cognitive potential for perception, articulation, and language, although they do not initially exist as differentiated cognitive faculties. Through repeated engagement with both internal and external reality, Chitta progressively acquires functional organization. Every sensory encounter initiates a process of transduction, giving rise to a vritti. Repeated vrittis become stabilized through memory, and recurring patterns gradually consolidate into samskaras. This developmental process may appropriately be described as the reverse formatting of chitta. Unlike ordinary formatting, in which structure is imposed upon an initially empty medium, Chitta already possesses the complete potentiality for transduction. Experience does not create this potential. Rather, it progressively organizes, differentiates, and stabilizes it through repeated interaction with reality. From a neurophysiological perspective, this progressive organization corresponds to the combined process of neurogenesis during early development, synaptogenesis through formation of new neural connections, and neuroplasticity through the continual strengthening, weakening, and reorganization of neural networks. These processes provide the biological substrate through which repeated sensory, articulatory, and cognitive experiences become progressively stabilized as enduring patterns of organization. Thus, the reverse formatting of chitta is not merely a philosophical abstraction, but a dynamic neurophysiological process accompanying the maturation of the human nervous system. The developmental sequence may therefore be represented as chitta, potentiality, sensory engagement, transduction, vritti, repeated engagement, smriti, samskara, neuroplastic stabilization, and maturation of manas and buddhi. Manas and buddhi are not original, independent constituents of chitta. They are functional differentiations arising through the progressive stabilization of transducing activity. At birth, the human organism possesses an inherited biological organization that provides the evolutionary basis for these capacities. Postnatal engagement with reality progressively differentiates this inherited potential into the operational faculties characteristic of the individual. Manas emerges as the matured capacity for coordinating sensory, linguistic, and motor possibilities. Buddhi emerges as the matured capacity for discrimination, judgment, and determination. Neither is an original substance within Chitta. Both are functional organizations that arise through repeated transduction between the Jnanendriyas, the 64 Aksharas, and the external world. This interpretation also clarifies the distinction between Smriti and Samskara. Smriti, one of the 5 chitta vrittis, denotes the reactivation of previously established transducing patterns. Samskara, by contrast, refers to the enduring structural disposition produced by repeated transduction and stabilized through neuroplastic reorganization. Repeated vrittis therefore become samskaras, and samskaras progressively reorganize the maturation of manas and buddhi. Non-verbal memory and the formation of personality. The earliest organization of chitta occurs prior to the emergence of language. Before the child acquires words, repeated experiences of hunger, comfort, pain, warmth, rhythm, touch, and movement continually agitate chitta and leave enduring impressions. These are not conceptual memories, but embodied patterns of response. The initial organization of chitta is therefore fundamentally non-verbal. Language enters only at a later stage, providing the means through which already established patterns become objects of reflection and interpretation. The developmental process may therefore be summarized as chitta, embodied experience, non-verbal memory, samskara, manas and buddhi, language, and reflexive consciousness. Personality is thus not created by discursive thought. Rather, it emerges through the interaction of these three successive levels. The innate potentiality of chitta, constituted by the 64 aksharas and 5 jnanendriyas, the non-verbal formation of sanskaras through repeated embodied experience, and the later development of language through which the individual reflects upon, interprets, and reorganizes these accumulated structures. Language, therefore, does not create the deeper formations of chitta. Its unique significance lies in its reflexive capacity. Because language can refer to itself, it enables consciousness to observe the very structures that have shaped the individual. In this sense, drashta becomes manifest through self-effect reflective power of Shabda. This understanding also deepens the meaning of Chitta, Yoga's Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Yoga does not seek the destruction of Chitta or the elimination of its dynamic activity. Its purpose is to free the Chitta from unconscious domination by its accumulated samskaras, allowing the mediating field to become transparent so that the drashta may abide in its own nature. The restoration of Chitta through the dharma of the 64 aksharas. Chitta in its original state is the universal potentiality constituted by the 64 aksharas together with the 5 jnanendriyas. The individual is not born with a fragmented consciousness. Rather, fragmentation develops progressively through repeated interactions with reality and language. These interactions leave non-verbal memories and samskaras that gradually mature into manas, buddhi, and the conditioned personality. While this process is indispensable for individual functioning, it also obscures the original universality of chitta by identifying it with its accumulated formations. The distortion of chitta is therefore not the destruction of its original nature, but the over identification with historically acquired patterns. The path of yoga is directed towards reversing this condition. The knowledge of the 64 aksharas provides the means by which the individual moves from particular vyakti to the universal jati. Every articulated sound is a particular manifestation of an underlying universal akshara. By recognizing the universal principle embodied in the aksharas, the practitioner gradually recognizes the universal structure of chitta itself. The study of the 64 aksharas is therefore far more than the acquisition of phonetic language. It is the recognition of the universal principles through which cognition
I did not get the sound or the progress.
Yeah, I think he lost the Wi-Fi or something.
Pause the recording.
Please continue.
So if you have any questions, most of the, at least 80% of the article has been covered. If there are any questions, because this is a totally a new interpretation of the concept of chitta. If anybody
Sir,
has any questions.
Yeah,
we are distancing ourselves in your absence that actually it is beyond your normally the scientists study up to the neurological level, materialistic level. But sir, you have studied much beyond that with your experience in meditation and so on. You linked the materialistic, this neurological and so on, the study of the brain aspect with the yoga aspect. It's excellent, sir. Please continue.
So should I read or we will discuss?
Sir, one or two questions will take, sir. Dr. Rajiv, please.
You can.
Purushotham, sir, I would like to know what is your profession, if you don't mind.
No, I am a freelancer. I have devoted myself to studying, and see, this has come by my way because of my tabla study. So Aksharas.
Yeah, I wanted to give you some inputs here. I'm a medical doctor. I'm into mental health. See, you have at times here mixed up Chit with Chetan. Consciousness is always there. There is Brahman, is consciousness. For plants, for animals, for worms, consciousness is always there. In a human being or an animal, conscious, unconscious, Chetan and Jagrut. Jagrut Sthiti. So you are trying to, you see what happened to Panini when Sanskrit was not there. Panini was able to get all these Maheshwara Sutras by going into meditation. He went into deep meditation and reached that high level of, he went into a kind of samadhi state, and he was able to perceive this Maheshwara Sutras and put it into for us, for all of us. So what we do is, we take that what we got from God through our rishis. And you were referring to Bhartruhari. I have done quite a bit of research on Bhartruhari's work. You see this Niti Shatakam, Vairagya Shatakam, and the other Shatakam, Tri Shatakam, what he wrote. It is all in the basis of, you can consider him as the father of human psychology. No doubt about it. But what I want to tell you is, Panini was there before Sanskrit language came, because Panini is the progenitor.
Sorry to interrupt, sir, but yeah. Panini, Sanskrit was there much before Panini. Vedic Samskritam is much before Panini. So I don't think Panini invented Sanskrit. He only put it in the format of sutras.
So Maheshwara Sutras was got by Panini?
No, it was there much before, and there were many Vyakaranas before Panini whom he quotes. So it is not.
There should be. My understanding is wrong. I beg your pardon. So the first rishi who got the Maheshwara Sutras, whatever his name is, I cannot know his name.
We don't know.
So we don't know his name. So that rishi, that Muni, that forefather, that grandfather, the great saint of our culture, was able to get those sutras, that knowledge from Maheshwara, and put it on paper, in the sense on for us, for all of us. Now, before that, how was he? He was able to reach that state of high level of consciousness, going into deep, forgetting his conscious. He's going into supra-conscious levels and going deeper into the state of to lie with that, and he was able to achieve. That is the source with which he got. That is what I'm trying to say. So therefore, the point is, you are mixing up Chit with Chetan, and physiological studies, and this is quite fairly interesting. But what I want to tell is, the psychologist study and the science which has been proved by electrophysiological studies and other fMRIs and other things are definitely proving what we have told, but we don't have documents to prove it today. That is a small thing which I want to share with you also. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for your presentation.
I'll just clarify that Chitta is a universal principle. It is the relationship between the individual and the environment. All living and even non-living things interact with the environment. They have a particular process through which they interact. That interacting process, without this, you cannot show, you cannot explain how things transform. For example, I'll give you a transducer. This word transducer is a new word. A transducer is a is a mediator or a mediation through which one signal is transformed into another signal. For example, you take the example of a solar cell. It transduces light into electricity. Now, there has to be some intervening principle that is there in between it.
I'll butt in here for a minute. I'll butt in here for a minute, sir, with your permission. Even for a brain dead person, consciousness is there. But when death occurs, there is no consciousness. But brain dead person is able to connect with the consciousness.
Yeah,
A brain dead person is able to connect with consciousness. And
obviously.
So consciousness is the only thing in Western people, there is a little bit of debate on this, but still some of them feel that it is there. And in a near death experience, or we say samadhi. Now I have done some research on samadhi and near death experience, how it is being looked upon. So therefore, that is what I was trying to say about. We try to connect in our examples what you gave in sensory organs and how the cognition and all that is not related to the consciousness, but to our conscious levels and how we perceive through our sense organs. So there's a mixing up of so many things which is which needs to be
I'll give you my clarification. I am not dealing with metaphysics. I am dealing with actually what happens when I interact. What makes me interact? How it determines my individual activity. See, abstraction as a universal principle, that is Western philosophy. In Indian philosophy, such abstractions, there is no Brahman is not associated with an universal Chetana. No, we don't do it. Brahman is Brahman, Chitta is Chitta. So what the question is, how is this related? For example, I'll give you, I think people here might be much more aware that this
Brahman and Chitta both are same, no sir?
No, they are
Parabrahman, that is
Nirguna
Parabrahman. Nirguna, it doesn't have guna, it doesn't have color, it doesn't have creed. It is pure consciousness. Ultimately, it is pure consciousness for animate, inanimate, for everything.
Because it is interactive.
Ukrainians or for Iranians, for whoever it is just one consciousness.
Yes, but the relationship between the particular, I'll give you, and I am quite honest about it. See, the relationship between the particular and the universal needs to be properly understood so that we don't take one for the other. The question is this, that therefore I said that the efficient principle is mediation as a transducer. It only transduces. It has otherwise, but that in the absence of that principle, nothing can occur. For example,
there is an anatomical understanding. Suppose you become unconscious. You've got subconscious mind, you've got the conscious mind, and you've got the unconscious mind. You talked about cognition. Now, what is cognition? Cognition, the definition of cognition is basically your ability to analyze these perceptions, what you said, through the five senses, put it into thoughts and analyze a proper way of doing it. That particular faculty in an unconscious person or one going to be anesthetized person ceases to be. So he is not able to have any cognition at all. Cognition will cease to exist in a person who is unconscious. But consciousness is still there. Consciousness is not gone.
See, as far as medicine is concerned, they investigate disease processes. We are not interested in disease processes.
I'm talking about human physiology. I'm talking not about disease. I'm talking about a healthy man. healthy man made by psychotherapy. I'm not giving you any medicine. I'm hypnotizing you. I'm taking your subconscious mind into myself. You will do exactly what I say. So therefore, I'm hypnotizing you. I can do the same thing by giving you some medicine. It can be some anesthetic medication like ether or something like that.
Can this, what I'm asking you is, can this become a part of science as it is, as we see it? That we have to establish
Telling
a
you is
relation.
these aksharas, what has been given by our pandits. With that, we can reach the levels of higher levels by simply hearing it. Because fMRI has been done on people who came and just sat down and they heard Om. They took an fMRI before.
Excuse me, Rajiv ji, please let's finish the respected sir को आप please finish करने दीजिए, then we can discuss. This is different way. We are angered.
It is a healthy.
Yes, I know this is healthy, but this healthy discussion can be discussed after sir's lecture. Thank you.
One minute, Dr. Rajiv. Dr. Rajiv.
It's a debate.
Yes, sir. Let me tell something. See, if the speaker wants to tell something important, let him finish first. Okay, sir. You want to?
What I'm trying to tell is that this particular word chitta, which has been going on in my mind, as I'm a very rank materialist. If I cannot identify that word with a particular visualization, I will not be in a position to understand what follows thereafter. So I have to first, the word chitta doesn't have meaning externally. Artha doesn't lie in a dictionary. Artha lies in your own visualization. So unless you are in a position to visualize what that word is to you, that word has not been understood. Suppose, for that matter, any word, Artha is not, therefore, what even Katyayana has said, Siddhe Shabdartha Sambandhe. But is the ability to join Shabda with Artha, is it universal and given? No effort has to be made. You cannot join the Shabda with the Artha. It is not natural and automatic. It is you have to make an effort to join it. So if for me, if it is chitta as a word, what is its nature? What is chitta? Is a question of investigation. The word itself. Therefore, unless that visualization has occurred, and then it can be expressed, the word chitta has no meaning. Chitta is
can I come in for a minute again, sir?
Dr. Rajiv, Dr. Rajiv, please. You have to listen to me. 1 minute.
This is very important, sir. When Rakesh Sharma went to space, what he saw, that was chitta. When Rakesh Sharma went to space, he said, "मैं भारत को यहाँ से देख रहा हूँ." He told that is chitta. That is conscious. That is what is consciousness. So you don't need anything more than this. I'm giving you an example of our Indian who has gone to the space and who said, from the consciousness is the whole thing is consciousness. That is so therefore, when you sit down meditation, we go to that level. That is Parabrahma. So what more do we need for a definition for that?
We should not enter into a school book framework. Consciousness is reaction to stimuli. This is very simplistic. You are giving that word consciousness has no deeper meaning. Whereas in the Sanskrit tradition, every word has a very defined meaning behind it. There is an intention there behind it. The word chitta is not casual. It is not a casual word. Yoga Sutras, if Yoga Sutras revolves around this word chitta, Patanjali doesn't look at it as a common word. He is looking at it as a technical word. This technicalness of that word needs to be appreciated and understood. This is my point. This is my point. I'm not looking at anything else. I'm looking at.
But you're mixing up conscious with consciousness.
Okay.
Consciousness. Yeah. I know its problem. I have not used the word consciousness in this article.
Sir, 1 minute.
Place or two.
Dr. Rajiv, please.
Yeah.
See,
Yes.
just will listen to Babu Garu. He wants to say something, and then let others also ask their questions, sir. Then you can combine and tell something, sir, as a conclusion. So first, listen to Babu Garu, then to the other people who want to ask questions. Please hold, Dr. Rajiv. Okay, Babu Garu.
So thank you, Venkatanaran Garu, for giving me this opportunity to just interrupt the discussion which is going on. Let us thank Dr. Rajiv ji. He is a well knowledgeable person who has done research on psychological and medical sort of, he is an expert in as a doctor, that too on psychological point of view. There is a point in what he is saying, but let us consider that separately. And what our speaker is done research on various abstract things, which are which are getting connected with each other, needs a lot of thinking about it before we say anything, any comment on that. So what I am thinking is, we will consider this article for publication in Vedavani. We have a e-journal, Vedavani. You all heard and read through this article. I request all of you to review this, and then give your comments to the author. Let him consider all these things and update his article. When it is finalized, we will publish it. And thank you so much for taking interest in such a beautiful topic, which is not common in this world. Nobody will think of all this. Though they think of it, but they can't imagine these things. So it is only rishis and the wise people of earlier times, they could visualize these things. Thank you so much. Let us go for the Rajivji, with your permission. Let us go for the next person. Let us them also.
Okay. Thank you, Babu Garu. Dr. Shamla, please.
Yes, sir.
Doctor.
Yes. Thank you very much for a very interesting lecture, sir. I have a couple of questions. First thing is that the five indriyas and chitta as the transmitter and buddhi as the decider is what we have been taught so far. So you add the other dimension of the aksharas.
True. So you want me to answer?
One moment, sir. Yes, sorry, sir. Yeah. So the other dimension of the 64 aksharas comes into your lecture, other than what we have already know. So here I want to ask you that see these aksharas are only according to our rishis and our dharmas and our Sanskrit language. What about the other people of other languages who do not have the 64 aksharas, and the animals who also have all these emotions and the rest of it, but are not familiar with the language itself? So how does that make sense? Like, how do you interpret that?
I'll give you the answer for it. Why the 64 aksharas? The 64 aksharas are specific articulatory potentials that exist in a newborn child. They are not we have not generated them. They already exist as physiological entities, which the child gets at birth. They are nothing new. Just as, for example, I'll give an example that a cow gives birth to a young one. Nobody has taught the child, the calf. The calf immediately gets up, goes to the udder and drinks milk. Who taught the child? These are natural potentialities that exist at birth. They are not induced from outside. There is scientific evidence to prove that until the age of 3 or 4, or I think 5 or 6 years, the child can receive new languages. there is scientific evidence that shows that after that time, the child resists taking up new languages. The reason is that the chitta has already been formatted. It cannot take up new sounds. So, secondly, the relationship between the ear, that is the auditory nerve, and the articulatory process. There has to be some relationship for this conversion, isn't it? Suppose you hear the word ka, and I asked you to repeat it. How do you repeat it? You have not seen what has happened in my mouth. However, still the child repeats ka. So here there is some transducing framework that has to exist, that is existing, and there is a word for it, that we have used the word chitta for it. So this chitta is a transducing material. 64 aksharas are not discovered.
Yeah.
They exist as it is. Secondly, 64 aksharas are according to the Vedas. Panini has only said 43 plus is 44. So 20 aksharas are short even in Panini also, in the Maheshwar Sutras. But that cover the other one because these explain the rest of the 20. So what I'm saying is that these 64 aksharas are there in every child born in the human species. The whole neurophysiological structure affords him to use it. Whether he uses it or not is the environment in which he is born. The question is not whether they exist independent. They don't come from outside. They come from within the human body. That is what I therefore they form the foundations of both. I think I have answered your question.
Yes, and the other thing is the Nirodha that you described it as destruction, but Nirodha is probably control of the chitta. That's what I understand from Nirodha word.
Nirodha is resisting. It is a sort of neti. It is not this, it is not that, it is not that. So this is a traditional Indian process.
Doubt.
So when a person if he is meditating, if he is doing Nirodha, what happens when he stops? He is saying not this. Then he has umpteen possibilities which open up to him. If he doesn't do it, if he does it in the same process, those possibilities vanish, and he goes as a structured individual, already as a personality, as if he owns what he the way he acts or thinks. That is not exactly his freedom. He has given away his freedom. What Patanjali wants to do is that that the person should get hold of his freedom back. Therefore, the whole first pada is of removing everything that has made him, that he thinks it is his. Therefore, the question of Nirodha comes in. It has nothing to do with the chitta. The chitta is always active. It has to be reoriented to its natural framework. How it will, just as we give examples, that just as a river follows it goes its own course. It has not to find it flows. So in the same way, the chitta has to be given sufficient space and freedom, which has been obstructed because of samskara. The eradication of the samskara is the topic under discussion in the Yoga Sutra. It is not the chitta.
Right.
Sir, with your permission, we'll go for prayer for 5
Thank
minutes.
you, sir.
Then okay. Right, Dr. Shamalaji, please do the prayer.
स्वस्ति प्रजाभ्यः परिपालयन्ताम् न्यायेन मार्गेण महीन् महिषाः गोब्राह्मणेभ्यः शुभमस्तु नित्यम् लोकाः समस्ताः सुखिनो भवन्तु काले वर्षतु पर्जन्यः पृथिवी सस्यशालिनी देशोऽयं क्षोभरहितो ब्राह्मणाः सन्तु निर्भयाः अपुत्राः पुत्रिणः सन्तु पुत्रिणः सन्तु पौत्रिणः अधनाः सधनाः सन्तु जीवन्तु शरदां शतम् सत्यं वद धर्मं चर स्वाध्यायं मा प्रमदः सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत् ॐ शान्तिः 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 ॐ पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते ॐ शान्तिः 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 सर्वे जनाः सुखिनो भवन्तु स्वस्ति
Sarve Jana Sukhino Bhavantu Swasti. Thank you, ma'am. Now we'll rise for national anthem. I request Sushmita ji to recite the national anthem.
जनगण मनाधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंधु गुजरात मराठा द्राविड उत्कल वंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभाशिष मागे गाहे तव जय गाथा जनगण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे जय हिंद
Jai Hind. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Dr. Shamala ji, have you finished your question, please?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. Mr. Krishna Prasad, please. Krishna Prasad garu.
Yeah. Yeah. Dr. Karveji, Achyut Karveji, it was a nice lecture. I just wanted to ask you one question. Chitta as the, Chitta as a mediator between the 64 Aksharas and also the 5 Gnanendriyas, what is its role in terms of Antakarana Suddhi? We talk of Antakarana Suddhi in Sanatana Dharma. So I am sure Chitta as a mediator, as a go-between, will have a crucial role. In what way it helps this Antakarana Suddhi? Could you please let us know?
See, what I feel is Antakarana is by the word itself. Right. It is objective. What is the difference between a transducer and an object? A transducer is an active device. It is an active device. So this active device has a role as Chitta, considering Chitta to be an active device. It has a role which can reformat past samskaras, which are referred to as antakarana. And that is what even in modern psychology or psychiatry, they say that he is previously formatted. The role of the psychiatrist is to remove that. We are taking external aid for it. In psychiatry, there is TA, transactional analysis also. So what is the nature of that antakarana? Therefore, I said that the chitta gets reverse formatted. The chitta gets reverse formatted through that through his activities itself in real time. Chitta is a thing that occurs in real time. It is not something that is past or future. It is in real time. So it is a real transducer between external reality, his words, and action. So this active device alone can change or reformat this antakarana. Antakarana is all that stuff which has been formatted already through previous experiences. That was not mine. Suppose what I am today is not my own making. I have been made by by interaction between myself, my body, my physical existence, and the reality around me. I have been by default I have been formatted. Now, if I want to unformat myself, I have to go through a specific process. The specific process through which we can go is reformatting the chitta. How do we reformat the chitta? The reformatting of the chitta can only occur that you cannot change the reality. You have to act. That is that is what follows from existence. What you can use for reformatting is language. This language and its attributes. If one comes to know that reformatting is possible. For example, what I am saying is, in short, we know that there is a letter called ka. I have a problem. What is the nature of that letter ka? Is that letter ka I am phoneting it? Suppose I am phoneting it. Is it mine, or is it something that has been afforded by nature? If what has been afforded by nature and I utilizing that same articulation comes into correspondence, I have linked myself with nature. So ka becomes ka. My ka and your ka should be one, but unfortunately they are different. Why? So this reformatting of these 64 aksharas itself is the starting frame of reference by which you will know what nature has afforded me. What am I using? Am I using it properly? That it should be used properly is that for Vyakaran exists. Why has the Vyakaran been written by Panini? The reason is that these aksharas should be properly articulated. That is why the whole Ashtadhyayi has been written. And it has been prefaced by the Maheshwar Sutras, which he knows that these are the things that have to be understood. So what ka is not what I am saying ka. Ka is just the articulation of an unmanifest ka, which I get at birth.
Right.
It is not my creation.
Right.
It is nature in its virgin state. It has without blemish. I have to connect it with my present activity with it. If I do that, I know how I am relating myself to reality. I can also know how I relate myself to my activity. Because it is Shabda and Siddhe Shabdartha Sambandhe. They word and meaning. Because in meaning, meaning is not meaning in a book. Meaning is visualization. I come from perception to word. When I go back, back from the word to perception. When I say a tree, I don't mean a tree, an object. I mean the perception that I got when I first saw the tree. So, Artha is not an alternative meaning, as the Westerners have done it. It is an immediate experience. When I say a tree, it is a tree without the physicalness of the tree. That is visualization, for which even the Chitta is responsible. Who projects the tree in front of you when you say tree? Is it me? No. These are potentialities that exist by nature in human beings. There is nothing beyond it. There is nothing before it. So
I understand. Yeah, I understand. Sanskrit, like a language, would be I mean, if pronounced properly, those aksharas would connect us to the chitta, and then the function of chitta would help.
That is you have understood it correctly. So,
thank you so much.
You cannot approach the chitta directly.
Right.
You have to approach it through activity. What is that activity? There are various phases in which those activities are defined. This is one among it and the most foundational too, because it is totally potential. And everyone has it, whether he is an Englishman or a German or an Indian. They are not using it. For example, a hammer is lying in your house. If you don't use that hammer, what use is it of? What Sanskrit enables is that it uses all these 64 aksharas. You cannot. All other languages do not need this. They don't need all these 64. Only Sanskrit needs these 64. If 64. You have to, that is the difference. Therefore, Sanskrit is a different language. It exploits all the potentialities. And therefore, in this Ayogavaha Aksharas, Patanjali has said that Panini did not need them. Why did Panini not need it? So the question is, Panini is not sure that there are only these, not one more than this. So the Ayogavaha Aksharas, because you cannot make sutras out of it. Ayogavaha Aksharas, if you can make sutras, then they are right. Then they are potential and they have to be found out. If they are not, then they are not Aksharas. Where you have to define them. Once you define them, then the problem is simple. And then you will not be in a position to work on them through our formal languages or any other language. You have to go back to Sanskrit to achieve. For example, yesterday I made a statement as far as tabla is concerned. It's a language. It is a language which does not use pavarga and chavarga. It is not used. Secondly, it does not use any of the ha, ya, va, ra, la or sha, sha, sa. Only it uses ra as a glide letter to glide between consonants, two vargiya consonants. It is a language which only contains consonants, vargiya consonants, with the help of vowels a, e, u, and a. Bas. So they have evolved a language with only so much. Still, their Samhita part is there. Their intention is the direction of Nikal, of how to play. They do not contain any semantic meaning, but it has meaning in the playing of it. So this is how we have to look at it. Yeah. Any other question?
Sir, can we go for the next question, please?
Yes,
Sridhar Subramaniam.
Namaskar, sir. Thank you very much. That was a brilliant analysis. I was reading it through, trying to register, decipher whatever you were saying. It's brilliantly connecting the dots. Now, my understanding was, like, when you said Chitta Shuddhi Nirodha, Vritti Nirodha, we thought there would be a cessation Nirodha, and Vrittis are, for every Kriya that you do over the Janmas, you are leaving impressions. And those Vrittis become Samskaras. Now, what you are saying is, it gives me hope. You are able to say, samskaras will determine the way you are going. You have to go with the flow. Anugachati pravaha. You have to go with the flow. But you are saying the volition becomes, it releases you from that bondage of the samskara, and you can exercise your free will. That's what you are saying. I see another connection. Shabda. You are connecting Shabda also. Now, when you recite Rudram Chamakam, or you do Nama Sankirtana through bhajans, these are all the mala of the words. They give the potency, and they will do the Chitta Shuddhi. This is my understanding. If I'm able to, did I interpret it rightly?
See what you are saying is, I'll tell you, is Sama and Ruka. These two aspects are different subject matters in themselves. In fact, in the Gita, it is said, ki know me as Sama. In all the Vedas, know me as Sama. Now, Sama, to know Sama also is difficult because of Yajnavalkya. Yajnavalkya has defined it very nicely. And I have followed North Indian classical music, and they have defined it, and North Indian classical music follows it. For example, I'll give you a simple example. What are the Sapta Swaras? And my investigation was, how do they differ from Western classical Swaras? They also say, do, re, mi, fa, sa, la, si, do. We don't say that.
We have Upasana Upayoga.
So in India, in our culture or in our tradition, we have put them into short form, sa, re, ga, ma, pa, da, ni, and again sa. But Yajnavalkya says that there are intonations that come into it. So it will not be sa, ri, ga, ma, pa, da, ni, sa. This is Western. Do, re, mi, fa, sa, la, si, do. This is Western. What is Indian? Indian is what Yajnavalkya said. Sari, Anudatta karo. Sari, Gama, Padhani, Sa. So here, there is an actual difference. There, in its evolution, even in Sama, there is difference. Leave about letters. 64 अक्षर तो छोड़ दो. Even साम में अंतर है. हमारे साम में और उनके साम में फर्क है. Their psalm is that the key aspect of it is the articulatory process through which this is attained and which has come traditionally into us. See, tabla compositions are of last 3-4 centuries, but still they carry the same seed which is there in the Vedas. The seed is the same. This is tradition. The tradition outlives generations. Why individuals? Traditions outlive generations. This is what I am witnessing. Suppose I am seeing modern Khyal Gaiki, I see the same reflection as is there in the Yajnavalkya Shiksha. So what I am trying to say is this can be resurrected because we have the requisite literature for resurrecting. The question is we have to work on it. That then resurrection will take place. Otherwise, it will go blind. Blind is not, that will not help us. Though it is true. मिलता है ना भजन करके हमारा तुकाराम महाराज भजन करके स्वर्ग प्राप्ति किया. Yes, it is in unique जहां भक्ति और उसका गीत एक ही हो गया. तो ये ट्रेडिशन में है. ये nobody can say it is not there. But can we define a shiksha part for it is the question. The question is whether we can reform our shiksha towards it. For example, I will give you a very good example which I many a times experienced. You take a 2 or 3 month old child. You just recite the Maheshwar Sutras in front of him correctly. The child responds. How does it respond? How does it understand the difference between a sound? Suppose a dog is barking, does he appreciate the letters in the same way as he appreciates the barking of a dog? No. He exclusively identifies Aksharas. You can make out whether it is a part of a language, this sound is a part of a language, or is it a part of a normal sound that exists all around. So this separation,
Sir, I'll interrupt you here. I'll share one small anecdote. Not anecdote, a situation where we went to an aged care place where people were afflicted with terminal illness. They were all almost vegetables, and we had we did one exercise where some singers, we did some program for 40 minutes where we sang a lot of bhajans, etc., and those lifeless people, we thought they were almost lifeless, but they were responding and they were वो ताल और इसके लिए नाच रहे थे.
तो ये बात
that corroborates whatever you're saying.
That is, so they are basic and foundational. The moment you understand what they are, it is because it is coming physiologically. It is nothing to do with the individual. The individual will only what you can say project it. It will see the relation what I was analyzing for so many past 40 years. What I'm analyzing is how does my ear or my hand and my articulation, how do they coordinate? What is the coordinating principle behind it? A child doesn't teach, he doesn't come with a language at birth, but he hears, he listens, and he reproduces. A child which is basically 100% deaf is 100% dumb. Why? So there is an interconnection. It has to be there, without which language will not become social, and it has to exist in every individual, every individual of that species. See, these are certain aspects which we need to reinterpret, and the unique word that I have found is this word chitta. This is a unique word because it is neither perception, it is neither speech, it is neither manas, it is neither buddhi, it is nothing of this. Then what is it? Is the question. You're getting how I have arrived at this. I have not arrived at it anything because I cannot identify it with it. If I say chitta is manas, is it so? No. It is an active device which relates us, which relates the individual with the reality and to the language and to action. So these are a three-way framework within which we have to work. This word is very explosive. It will give a lot of things out. And this is not against the tradition. The tradition is in what I am saying is this is where the tradition is going. It is seeing it. It has not expressed it. If Patanjali can write the Yoga Sutras, do I mean that he has not understood what the role of the Chitta is? Without understanding the role of the Chitta, can he write the Yoga Sutras? No. So he has expressed
it. We are running out of time.
Sure.
Last question. One small question.
Sir, you have to be very brief, sir. Please ask to the point.
Professor Karve, what I was thinking about was when you talked of tabla between Hindustani and Carnatic in the sapasa mode, sarigama padanisa mode. Do you find any difference in tabla playing between Hindustani and Carnatic? Okay, and also in terms of the music healing that music as a therapy, all of us know. Sridhar talked about it. So, do you have any specific, let's say, tabla tune or a concept which actually gives relief for a specific disease, right? Something like that. Can you tell us about it? First thing is about Hindustani, Carnatic music. Is there any difference for tabla tunes and all? The other one is music therapy part of it from tabla point of view.
See to say that what is the difference? See, in the Shuddha mode of Saregama Padanisa, the North Indian music uses Shuddha Swaras. The South Indian music uses Komal Swaras.
Okay.
The difference is between saying it as, the North Indians will say it as A. The South Indians will say it as A. Sari, Gama, aisa karenge. North Indians will do it as, the articulatory format is different, though the notes are the same. The second question is that reduces or gives off the Udatta Anudatta framework. What the North Indian music has remained alive to is the Anudatta Udatta framework that is there. For example, I'll give you Sariga. So this is Sari. This is original. Re. In modern Hindustani music, they say A. That is incorrect. It is Sariga. It is like this. What South Indian music does is it uses Komal Swaras for this basically the Sapta Swara. It uses Sariga. It will go without intonation. But however, wherever in the Kruti there is a Shuddha Swara, they will do Shuddha Swara. That is different. Secondly, the question is between mean, the what we call as Samhita part. Now with an A can undergo Samhita part much more easily than an A. So these differences do exist, but they reflect two different aspects of the same traditional framework. So differences are there. For example, there is difference between Mridanga and Pakhavaj, and even between Pakhavaj and Tabla. They are linguistically they are different. So what I want to say is this has to be investigated. Every Indian language works a different way. It uses different aksharas in different manners. Yeah. So the question is, but all are within the framework of the 64 letters of Sanskrit. Once you see what happens if you don't get it properly, as is given in the basic structure, it distorts. For example, I'll give you Ata ghar. Now a Marathi word is ghar. When I write gha and ra. Now in ghar, the of the ra is not phonetic. The last letter, you just keep an eye on the last letter, whether the last letter vowel is being completely articulated or not. If the last vowel is not articulated completely, it will result in distortion. Oh, ghai hota hai. There will be a haste to speak. This haste distorts. This is what in music, this has to be stopped. Every letter has to be completed. The last letter will indicate whether the language has done it. And for this, pratyayas are used in Sanskrit. So if I say Rama, the has vanished. So I say Rama. Now this is a complete phonetic event. It has not gulped anything. It has not. Every complete articulation is there. Rama gramam gacchati. Every letter in Laya has been articulated and spoken. That becomes communicable in one-to-one correspondence. Otherwise, there is a gap between Shabda and Artha. In communication, you're getting, these are certain nice, subtle points which we need to work on.
Sir, excuse me, Dr. Babu Garu wants to say something. I think we should close the session.
Then we can sit. What you do is 2 weeks down the line, you distribute this article, and we will give a session to discuss this because this is very important.
Yes, sir.
One small suggestion, just 1 minute, not more than a minute.
No. Yeah, you have to please. Babu Garu wants to say something.
Let Rajiv ji say, quickly, then yes. Let us close.
Bullet question, Rajiv. Bullet question.
Yes, sir. Yeah. I actually wanted to add something to you, sir. Sanskrit, before the Sanskrit language, there were some other civilizations. Tamil says that Tamil is older than Sanskrit. Before Sanskrit, Tamil, there was another civilization. So that is gone somewhere down Gujarat. So the British people, they did a research. They went down. They took out, along with other people also, from other countries. They found that the lingo which was there inside the ocean, inside the sea, it was very similar to that of Sanskrit, but it is not Sanskrit. So that means there was something existing before that. And we know about the Yuga theory, how the whole thing goes. So absolutely, I'm in line with you about the Akshara, Mantra Shakti and all those things, sir. And then one more thing is Para. We learnt recently from yesterday's lecture from Dr. Vishalakshi. Para Pashyati Madhyama Vaikari. And this Vaikari thing that is does not exist in the plants and animals, which is there only in human, so that we can go at higher level of thinking. So this is one more thing what I just wanted to add. Thank you very much for the medical aspect.
I'll just tell you that this Abrahamic religions who talk about creation, they are foolhardy because they are not living in the present. We are concerned with the present, not with the past. The question is, do you want to say that no languages existed before any language existed? Is the creation of man and a language separate or one and the same? Did nature give birth to man with the language or just with a body and a separate language? Or the body comes with a language? There are no two things there. Communication is species communication. Species have to communicate if they have to exist. So language, which came first, is a foolish question. Which came first, egg or the hen? These are speculative and totally speculative questions. These have no reality bondage or bound. They are not formulated realistically. For the Indian tradition, only the present is real. All other things are false. There is no past, there is no future, there is the present that is there which we want to catch. And catching hold of the chitta is what the present is.
Right.
Which
Right,
is
sir.
which you cannot language will not do that. Language affords a possibility for expression that this happened previously. That is
Thanks
what
a lot, sir. Thanks a lot, sir.
Bye.
We'll close the session. Thank you very much for clarifying all the doubts, and I thank all the participants for very actively participating in this session. Thank you all. Have a nice day.
1 minute. I want to say, Venkataraman garu, can I say?
Please.
Okay. I want to confirm from Achyut Karveji. Can we consider this article for publication in Vedvani?
Yes. I will. What I can do, I have to again go through it. For an article, it is a different format. So I will work on it. I'll give you the draft for it. You go through the draft. But before that, I'll like if there are many who are learned here, if they can go through the draft and suggest and or comment, even criticize. I will be very happy. I will be very happy before you see if this article becomes a group article, that will be much more. It will reflect a better reality than I writing it. So yeah, if it is a product of a few learned people, that will contribute in a very great deal and add something to our tradition. If you can arrange, you arrange for a session, say 10 days or 15 days down the line, when all have read the article, let them comment on. This is not a very thought over. This is what has occurred to me, which I have tried to present. So with in various domains, it will have repercussions in many domains, not in a single domain. So people from various let them reflect and give me responses to you, and we will discuss it once more.
Since he's agreed for considering for our Vedvani, so I request
Share the
all
article.
people who are interested in reviewing this article and giving your opinion of the contents of it, please send it to me, referring to this and what you think, whether for making a public document publication in the Vedvani, what changes you think they should be made, or whatever way you want to express, review it and then send the comments to me. I will share it with Karveji, and we will try to finalize this in due course of time. Somebody else wants to say anything? You go ahead.
I think we'll close this session, sir. Thanks a lot. Thanks all of you.
Okay.
Bye then.
Okay.
Have a nice day.
Bye. Thank you.